all full-frame cameras are created equal, right? I mean, if you listen to the online camera forums, you'd think that that is all a camera needs. You need a full-frame sensor and nothing else. Well, either way, today we're gonna be comparing stellar monster cameras against each other and see which one works best for the online content creator. We've talked a whole bunch about the Sony A7 III. This is one of my favorite cameras of all time. It's got great colors, great image quality. The lens options that you can get for this thing, for the E-mount, I mean, they are second to none, especially when you were thinking about going for the quote unquote budget route. Like if you want to use third-party lenses that don't cost you an arm and a leg, the E-mount is the way to go. However, the other powerhouse today is a camera that costs twice as much, but has the features to back it up. The Lumix S1H is basically a 6K cinema camera that's crammed into the body of a 24 megapixel stills camera. It can record in ways that make traditional video cameras blush. It has incredible stabilization, and I mean, it's so big that I think you could double this as like ballast if you need more size and weight to bring down your hot air balloon. But just because something wins in overall specs doesn't necessarily mean that it's the best for those of us creating online content, right? So which of these comes out on top? Let's find out. What's up everyone, I'm the Everyday Dad, and if I can figure it out, you can figure it out. So first up, before we start the comparison, I really like both of these cameras, which is probably why I purchased each of these. Nobody provided these to me. I bought this and I bought this. And the second thing I want to mention is online content creators are always looking for new gear to increase either their production efficiency or the quality of their videos. And we are always looking at new cameras to do that. So long story long, while these may be two different styles of cameras, people creating online video will be looking at both. So I compare all cameras that come across this desk with three separate categories: video quality, ease of use, and overall upgrade path / ecosystem. First up, video quality. Both of these cameras have a 24 megapixel full frame CMOS sensor. I can't prove this, but both were probably made by Sony too. The A7 III can record up to 4K 24 frames per second, 8-bit 420 full censored width with a slight crop in 30 frames per second, while the S1H can do 6K 24 frames per second, 10-bit 420 full width of the sensor, and it can do 4K 60 if you're willing to accept an APS-C crop. Legitimately, we could be here all day long going over the recording codecs and resolutions and capabilities inside of the S1H, so another long story long, it's got a lot. Slow motion in the A7 III is 1080p and up to 120 frames per second, whereas slow motion in the S1H is 1080p and up to 180 frames per second. We'll go over this more in ease of use, but the Sony does have access to an incredibly powerful phase detection autofocus system, which when in stills mode, has eye autofocus for both human and animal subjects, that when you're taking pictures, it's almost like cheating. In video, it will do face tracking well enough that it's one of the two brands, Sony and Canon, that I will actually trust to do video autofocus. Like right now, we are not using continuous autofocus, we're in manual focus. The S1H uses a contrast-based system called depth from defocus that in my last few weeks of recording with the camera, it actually seems to be the best I've ever come across from a Lumix camera. Normally with a Panasonic camera, there's a lot of like autofocus wobble in the background, but I haven't seen too much of that in the S1H video mode. Now, one of the cool things about the S1H is in stills mode, this has probably the fastest single shot autofocus I've ever seen. It's like before you either hit the back button focus or you half press the shutter button, it already has what you want in focus. But enough about specs. How does the image quality out of both cameras really look? I mean, they both look pretty good. Obviously, the Lumix S1H can record at 6K and 5.9K, which is nothing that the A7 III, I mean, it cannot match that. The A7 III does have a 6K sensor though that downsamples to 4K, so while it doesn't have the actual resolution, it has the same starting point as the S1H. So you do get 6K worth of information even if it's not giving it to you in actual 6K. On that note, something that's both a positive and a negative for the Sony hybrid cameras in general is their recodec. XAVC in the hybrid cameras always ends up being a 420 8-bit, 100 megabit file without the ability to increase it even if you record externally. I mean, you can get 422 externally, but that's not that big of a deal. I mean, the big negative is the codec inside of the camera. The positive is that they are really efficient with that codec. So even though it's only 100 megabits, I find the A7 III to have plenty of dynamic range. The footage is incredibly sharp, and being able to do all of that with a full frame sensor is pretty darn impressive. I mean, there was a reason this is such a disruptive camera. I mean, I own one because of how amazing the image quality out of this camera is. But the S1H's footage looks fantastic. Legitimately the best footage I've ever been able to record in my life. And I've used tons of cameras. The GH5 we're on right now is one of my favorite cameras of all time, if not my actual favorite. And honestly, I've never really considered it to have the best color science. It's workable and good enough, or I wouldn't use it, but I've always liked colors from other cameras more. The S1H does have the best color science ever. Okay, that might be a loaded term to just throw out so easily. The S1H has my favorite color science ever. Whew. That was close. We could have got beaten up on the internet for that. The S1H includes the full V-Log profile from the Panasonic VariCam line, and it's hands down, the easiest log format to grade that I've ever come across. I know I've said this a few times, but I used to think that Canon C-Log was the easiest. No, this V-Log is absolutely the easiest. Seriously, if I'm saying this, if I can use it, anyone can use it, because I'm not the best or even like the most okayest colorist. I barely function as a colorist, and this just works. When talking about picture profiles, the Sony isn't a slouch either. It does have a few of the S-Log options and their newer HLG profiles, and while they work, it's not the easiest format to use, so I invariably end up using the standard profile. And that's not necessarily bad, because the standard picture profile in the A7 III is pretty darn good. But image quality won't get you that far in the online sphere. No matter how good your video looks to you when you are done editing, your platform will take that nice file, it'll scrunch it up into a ball, it'll toss it around a little bit, and by the time it comes out on the other side, once you've uploaded it, it will look much different. And that's where, for the online content creator, technical image quality isn't always the best investment. That's why audio is the far more important part of the overall video quality. And this comparison is gonna be tougher. Both the Sony and the Panasonic are two of my favorite brands when it comes to built-in internal preamps. As both of these cameras do have an internal 3.5mm audio in jack that you can plug pretty basic microphones into both and get pretty decent scratch audio, or you could lower the internal gain as much as possible and let the microphones do the work, get really great results. Now, normally this next part is where the Panasonic cameras come in and dominate with their DMW XLR1 attachment, but Sony themselves have the K3M, which is almost the exact same powered XLR device that plugs into the hot shoe mounts on both cameras. So both the video-centric Lumix cameras, the S1, the S1H, the S1R, the GH5, the GH5S, and all of the Sony mirrorless options, including their APS-C lineup, can have two XLR inputs with 48V of phantom power. If I had to give a ranking though, if I had to pick which one was better, I do like the Lumix option for a couple of reasons. One, it has a cold shoe built right on top of the device, so you don't have to give up any mounting options on top of the camera, and I do find it easier to get clean audio with the Lumix adapter. I do find that I have to baby the K3M and set it to much lower power because it has a habit of making my audio a little too hot otherwise, and since I can't monitor it while I'm making these videos, you have to be way more conservative on the Sony. But either way, both cameras are really darn good when it comes to internal audio. But video quality, even audio, is only so important. People with huge audiences make compelling content with cell phones. What matters most to me and others in the online camera sphere is ease of use. Can one of these be part of the team? And can it be a quasi-operator of itself so you don't have to worry, you don't have to baby the camera, you can focus on making your content? Neither of these is perfect in ease of use. They both excel and fail in different ways. The S1H excels because it has a super customizable body. Almost every single button on this camera can be set to do whatever function you want that the camera can do. I have the exposure compensation and the ISO buttons set to the Wi-Fi and the live crop modes respectively because I didn't only have a few custom buttons to work with. This whole camera, the whole body is like one big customizable playground. Additionally, the S1H excels because it's got a fantastic touchscreen display on the back. This display tilts, it flips, it jumps, it does, if there's a way that you want a hybrid screen on a camera to move, this camera does it. Chances are the S1H can do it. Plus, the touch functionality is really great when you are in front of the camera and you need to tweak a few things, or heck, even if you just want to judge your framing or your exposure, this is so insanely useful. I love the screen. I wish every camera brand needs this kind of screen. And lastly, on the good side of ease of use, the S1H has crazy good in-body image stabilization. That means you can get a lot of really good shots without needing a bunch or expensive support or stabilization gear. Which is no slouch in ease of use either. It also has a few custom buttons that you can get to work with on top, but it's not nearly as much as the S1H. I would say this is the bare minimum of functionality that I like inside of a camera. The main win for the A7 III though, especially in ease of use, is the fantastic autofocus. Sony in the last few years has really set the bar on what good continuous video autofocus is capable of, and I absolutely trust it in this system. I do not trust Fuji, I do trust Sony. Something else that is kind of a big deal, the Sony is much easier to carry around and maneuver because it is a much smaller and much lighter camera. Now you might think that that's like a small thing to complain about, but as I get older, like carrying around bigger cameras is not nearly, like it's not fun. And part of this for me is fun. This also has built-in in-body image stabilization, but honestly, Sony's stabilization is more for stills than video. It's fine, but it's nothing that remarkable. I like that it's there, but if it wasn't, meh. Where the Sony really kind of falls down is the physical usability. There is no front articulation on this screen, which Sony, as of yet, has not included on their full-frame cameras. Here's hoping though, right? Plus, the screen is only touch enabled for focus, so you can't tap to work through the menus or change the settings. Now, where this is really a pain is when you are in front of the camera, and if you have a monitor recording you, which you lose face tracking autofocus if you have a monitor just showing you, and you need to change something, you have to actually get up and go behind the camera to make those changes. Now, it does have really good auto settings, so you don't need to do that as much, but if you wanna manually dial it in, you're kind of out of luck. But consider each tweak that you make takes maybe a minute. And imagine how many of those you need to make per video, and you gotta calculate that across all the videos you're gonna make a year. For me, that's about 3 hours of wasted time a year. And that's just in that one little thing. Little efficiencies add up. Okay, so you've got great video quality and you figured out how to use the camera. So where do you go from here? What kind of accessories and ecosystem exists for your camera? Because these are systems you invest in. These are not single purchase devices, unless you buy a camcorder, or a point and shoot, or an action camera. Well, this in my opinion is where the tables turn away from the S1H. The S1H has the Leica L mount, which while versatile, currently doesn't have nearly as many options on the market, and certainly not many that could be considered affordable. You might say to yourself, everyday dad, if you have the money for this kind of body, surely you have the money for those kind of expensive lenses. And yes, you do need to consider that when you buy a body, but that kind of talk is not valid when we talk about the E-mount. So let's talk about the E-mount, which you will find on the A7 III. This easily has the most options out there for native lenses of any mirrorless camera. But what's really nice is while Sony does have those eye-wateringly expensive G-Master options, plenty of third-party developers have come up with very high-quality glass that also doesn't break the bank. The Tamron 17-28 2.8 basically lives on this camera, and it comes in at under $1,000. The Tamron 20-75 is another fantastic zoom for not that much money. Plus the Sigma 24-70 2.8 will be a positive for both cameras, but that just goes to show that all of the good, affordable third-party options are coming out for the E-mount. This is hands down, the most versatile and probably the best investment that you can make in the near to midterm future, especially if you think of all the new Sony cinema cameras coming out. And again, this is my opinion, but that's really where Sony is winning right now. All of their cameras share a single mount. If I'm using an A6400, I can take that lens off of that camera, put it on the A7 III. If I want to go from the A7 III to an FX9, I just pop it off of the A7 III, put it on an FX9. That's where it's truly an ecosystem, and it's not different styles within a company. Panasonic has micro four thirds, and they now have full frame. Canon has like 5 different mounts, Nikon has 3. It's so good to have one shared mount. Whew. This video got way longer than I expected, but at the end of the day, so what, right? Which of these works best for the online creator? Like I said in the beginning, it's pretty clear that these are two different kinds of cameras. One is a video camera with stills capability, and the other is a stills camera with video capabilities. And the cinema crowd's gonna be like, they're all stills cameras. If you are a filmmaker, which I am not, yes, I would absolutely recommend the S1H. This is the best video camera I've ever used. I think you get really good value for money. It's crazy good. But if you are like me and you make online video, the A7 III is still an absolute beast of a camera, and this can do everything you need and more for less than half the price and a much lower overall cost of ownership. But this is definitely gonna be one where I'm gonna be wishy-washy and I'm gonna have to leave the rest up to you to decide, because this is too intense for the everyday dad to decide. However, if you like this video, I bet you'd like the even tougher one that I made comparing the S1H to the GH5, and you can find that by clicking here. Click, 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 click. Thanks for watching.